This is a short revision video for Chapter 10, Area and Volume 1 from the Edexcel book. Now the first thing we did was to look at finding the areas of some basic shapes. So the first one of those was a triangle by doing base times height and then dividing by 2. So the height needs to be the perpendicular height to the base. It needs to go directly from the base to the top. It's not going to be the lengths of any of the diagonal sides. If they are there, it might be for perimeter, but certainly not for area problems. The next shape we looked at was a parallelogram. Again, it's just base times height, and again, the height needs to be the perpendicular distance from the base to the top, not the diagonals on the side. Make sure you're using the correct values. The final shape we did look at was a trapezium, and this is usually a formula that's given at the front of a GCSE test paper, but you will not have that in your test that you do. You will need to make sure you remember it. So you need to find the height, again it's perpendicular height from the base, and multiply that to the sum of the two parallel sides labelled A and B. Then divide by 2 at the end. So these were the basic shapes we looked at. It's assumed you'd know how to do others, so just make sure you can remember these and use them to solve problems. The next bit of the chapter I'm going to go through is the work on circles, which you had a homework on as well. So you needed to recall some basic facts from your Key Stage 3 learning, that you have radius and diameter and you use the letters R and D, that the area of a circle has a formula of pi r squared, and that the circumference could be 2 pi r or pi d. And you needed to use these in a range of ways, from say grade D, where you're just given the basic information and you have to put it in, up to around grade C and D, where you actually needed to solve problems where you had diagrams that contained parts of circles. You might have semicircles or quarter circles, and you would have to work out, say, areas or perimeters involving those kinds of calculations. There was also the odd question where you would be given the area for a circle and then be asked to work out, say, its radius or even its circumference in worst case scenarios. So make sure that you are familiar with these two formulae for circles and that you're able to use them in a variety of ways. The next bit of the chapter I'm going to talk about was when we worked looking at 3D shapes and their nets. So on the screen you can see a number of 3D shapes as examples, and ignore the sphere in this, but we did look at these shapes and what kind of nets they had. The cube, we looked at several different types it could possibly have. You also did work where you were given a 3D shape with dimensions, you had to draw the net accurately. What you need to be able to do from the chapter was really know these 3D shapes, know what kind of nets they would have, and be able to answer some questions about how those nets would form together to build these, or how you would draw them accurately in the first place. So it's again not something I want to go into too much detail on, but it's just making you aware that this could be questions that you would expect to have in your test. Another part of our chapter work looked at plan, front and side elevations for a 3D shape. So a number of questions could come up on this where you might be given a 3D shape and asked to draw its plan, front or side elevation, or all three. And they would look like the 2D diagrams you can see on the right. And you have to imagine yourself from those points of view looking at these shapes and being able to draw what you would see. Another question could be to have the plan, front and side elevation and be asked what 3D shape is this and be able to draw it. So a bit of our work in lesson was practicing this. Not all of the work we did involved, say, shapes made up of cubes. We might actually have a 3D shape already drawn like we saw on the last slide, and we might be having to find plan, front and side elevations for those. So again, from the chapter we looked at this, and be prepared to answer some questions like this in your test. The last three parts of the chapter that we did concentrated on volumes, where we looked at the volume of a cuboid, volumes of prisms such as this, and also volumes of cylinders, and various problems surrounding that, and various difficulties. In the most easy cases you would actually just work out the volume given some information on the right. In the more difficult problems you would be told the volume and then be asked to work out something else. So be prepared for a variety of problems on this and being able to use these in various ways. You might have shapes that you need to break down into smaller shapes. You might have to make sure that you are writing down plenty of working out as well. So that completes the review of the chapter. It's quite a quick run through, and so hopefully you found that useful. Thanks.